The laughter echoed off marble. Light, crisp, the kind that cuts sharper than words. A girl stood frozen beneath a painting she couldn't afford to touch, let alone buy. Wavy hair tied back. Faded hoodie. A sketchbook tucked awkwardly under her arm. Her name was Sienna. 23. Art student. Nervous. Hopeful. She had waited in line outside the prestigious Lyon Gallery for 2 hours. Not to buy. Not even to be noticed. Just to see. But someone had noticed. And now, they were laughing. "She doesn't look like a collector," said one woman, loud enough for the room to hear. White blouse, sharp heels, wine glass poised like a prop. The other women around her giggled into their champagne. Sienna lowered her gaze. A young assistant behind the front desk stepped closer and smiled politely, the kind of smile that hides its edges. "Unfortunately, ma'am, this event is for invited patrons." "I RSVP'd through the site," Sienna whispered, voice cracking slightly. "Yes," the assistant nodded. "But this is a private viewing. Next time, maybe come with a sponsor?" The implication was heavy. She wasn't wanted. Not by them. Not here. In the far corner of the gallery, between 2 sculptures and a glass case, a man stood alone. Jeans. Plain black jacket. Hands in pockets. He wasn't sipping wine. He wasn't name-dropping artists. He was just watching. Observing. Keanu Reeves. No cameras. No entourage. No spotlight. Just a quiet man who had slipped into the gallery unnoticed, until he noticed her. His brow lowered slightly as he listened. He didn't move yet. But his eyes never left Sienna. Because something about cruelty masked as culture always hit him hardest. Sienna didn't cry. She wouldn't give them that. But her fingers tightened around her sketchbook as she turned toward the exit, trying to disappear into the polished silence of the gallery. The heels. The whispers. The smiles, polished like mirrors, reflecting nothing but ego. She walked past a towering abstract canvas, barely looking up. Her throat burned. Her cheeks prickled. Near the door, she paused beneath a glass chandelier that sparkled like it was in on the joke. Then a voice, low, warm, cut through the noise like a soft chord in a room full of static. "You came here for the art, right?" She turned, startled. The man from the corner was standing beside a sculpture of a hand reaching skyward. Messy hair. Calm eyes. Worn sneakers. He didn't look like a gallery type either. "Yes," she said quietly. He nodded toward the center of the room. "Then don't let people get in the way of what you came to see." Sienna hesitated. "They said I wasn't." "Art doesn't care who's rich," he said. "And neither do I." She looked at him, unsure. But something in his tone held. Not performative. Not pitying. Steady. Like a voice that had spoken to pain before, and made peace with it. Sienna turned back toward the gallery. "There's a piece I wanted to see. Room 2. A Sorel original." The man smiled gently. "Lead the way." And for the first time in half an hour, her sketchbook no longer felt like a shield. It felt like hers. Room 2 was quieter. Fewer guests. Less posturing. Just the gentle hum of a climate-controlled sanctuary where canvas whispered to canvas. Sienna stopped in front of a large oil painting, bold brushwork, layered textures, the kind of piece that looked like it had lived. She exhaled slowly. There it is. Keanu stood a pace behind her, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes on the painting. "You know the story behind this one?" she asked, voice quieter now, not timid, just reverent. Keanu shook his head. "Only what it told me just now." She smiled, glancing sideways. "You see it too?" "I see something." Sienna stepped closer, her voice softening into certainty. Sorel painted it in a mental hospital. After her son died. The museum refused it for years because it was too raw. But it's her best work. You can feel it. All of her grief. Her fury. Her refusal to be palatable. Keanu nodded slowly. "You talk like you've been there." Sienna hesitated. "I haven't lost a child," she said. "But I know what it's like to create something no one wants to look at. Not because it's bad, but because it's honest." Behind them, in the doorway, the gallery assistant from earlier had returned. She didn't interrupt. just watched, and frowned. One of the women from the champagne circle whispered, "Wait, isn't that Keanu Reeves?" The assistant tilted her head. Now she was unsure, because the man who'd entered quietly, who didn't belong, was suddenly the most interesting presence in the room. And he wasn't with them. Keanu turned to Sienna. "You brought your own art?" She clutched her sketchbook protectively. "Yeah. I know it's not." He smiled. "Would you show me one?" She stared at him. "Why?" "Because," he said, stepping beside her, "I want to see what someone brave enough to stand in front of this painting has to say with her own hands."
Sienna hesitated, not because she didn't want to share, but because no one had ever asked her to. Her fingers ran across the worn cover of her sketchbook. Years of ideas lived inside. Half-finished faces, broken buildings, quiet grief in pencil form. She looked at Keanu. He didn't pressure, just waited, and that made all the difference. With a deep breath, she opened the book and turned it around. Page 1. A charcoal sketch of a subway platform. Empty, except for a girl sitting alone, clutching her knees. Keanu looked at it like it mattered, like it belonged. Behind them, whispers stirred. Two women from the earlier group now stood just inside the room, sipping silently. One of them lowered her glass. "That's not bad," she murmured. The gallery assistant tilted her head, inching closer. Sienna turned the page. Page 2. A tattered coat hanging on a hook. No person in sight. Just raindrops gathering on the floor below. Keanu's voice was low. "That one hurts." Sienna looked surprised. "You saw that?" "I've worn it," he said softly. She flipped through 3 more pieces. With each page, the space around them thickened. Not with judgment, but with attention. Raw graphite sketches, emotionally unfinished. Technically imperfect, but achingly real. Keanu nodded. "This is the stuff you can't frame." Sienna blinked. "What do you mean?" "You can't mass-produce it. You can't make it commercial. That's why they don't want it," he said. "But it's what people feel." Behind them, the assistant finally stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, her voice tight but polite. "Would you mind if I had a look?" Sienna froze. Keanu gently stepped aside. "She's the artist," he said simply. The assistant looked down at the sketchbook, and for the first time all night, said nothing, just stared. And then, "Do you have more?" Sienna stood still as the gallery assistant flipped slowly through her sketchbook. What began as polite observation turned into silence, so heavy you could feel it in your chest. Behind them, the murmurs grew. More patrons began drifting toward room 2, not because of the curated exhibition, but because of her, because of the girl in the hoodie, the one who wasn't supposed to matter. "Who represents her?" asked a man in a navy jacket. His wife whispered back, "I think she's independent." Another woman stepped closer, tilting her head. "These aren't bad. They're raw, honest." The assistant looked up at Sienna. "Have you ever shown at a gallery?" Sienna blinked. "No, I've never even been inside one like this before today." She wasn't bragging, just stating a fact. And that fact stunned them. The assistant cleared her throat, suddenly aware of how little she'd actually known 5 minutes ago. "These are compelling," she said. "Deeply emotional. Your line work is—" She trailed off, looking almost apologetic. "I'm sorry Sienna shook her head. "It's okay." But they both knew it wasn't. Keanu stepped to the side, watching it unfold. He hadn't said a word since stepping aside. He didn't need to, because truth doesn't yell. It just stands still and lets the room come to it. One of the champagne women finally stepped forward, no longer sneering. "Do you sell prints?" Sienna stared at her, then nodded, barely. "Not yet," she said, "but I could." The woman pulled a card from her clutch and extended it with careful grace. "If you do, I know people." And just like that, the girl they tried to push out became the one they were suddenly trying to pull in. But Sienna didn't reach for the card right away. Instead, she turned to the man who had stood beside her when no one else did. "Thank you," she whispered. Keanu smiled. "I didn't do anything." "Yes, you did," she said. "You stayed." The assistant called over the gallery's creative director. a man in sleek glasses and a scarf that screamed curated taste. He arrived with an espresso in hand and a clipboard already under his arm. Sienna's sketchbook now sat on a velvet-covered pedestal, usually reserved for six-figure canvases. "I must say," he drawled, flipping to the pages, "there's something quite untamed about these." Sienna shifted uneasily. "She's never shown before," the assistant added quickly. "No representation. No agent. Fresh voice." He lit up. "That's very marketable." Keanu remained in the back, arms folded, leaning casually against a pillar, watching. Sienna stepped forward. "I'm not really sure what's happening." The director smiled. "What's happening is opportunity. We're preparing a small exhibition next month. Emerging voices, raw perspectives, emotion-driven art. You'd be perfect for it." Sienna's heart pounded. "You want to show my work?" "Yes," he said. "Of course, we need to refine some pieces. Clean up the presentation. Maybe simplify the messaging a little. Not everyone understands grief sketches and poverty lines. You know." He laughed lightly. Sienna didn't. She looked down at the open page. A drawing of her mother's hands, inked from memory, worn, calloused, holding a broken teacup. "I don't really want to clean them up," she said quietly. The director hesitated. "Raw is good, but gallery raw has to be digestible." Keanu's voice floated in, not loud, but firm. "Or maybe it doesn't." The director turned. "I'm sorry, and you are?" Keanu stepped forward at last. "Sienna's friend," he said, "and someone who knows what happens when you polish pain until it loses its power." A pause. Then Sienna looked back at the director. "I appreciate the offer," she said, steady now. "But if I do this, it has to be my way. Every piece. Every page. No edits." The director blinked. "We'll discuss." "No," she said. "That's a discussion." Somewhere behind her, one of the patrons clapped once. Just once. Then again, and others followed. Small, genuine, because truth doesn't always sell first, but it always lands. It was past midnight when Sienna got home. Her sketchbook still clutched in her arms like armor. She hadn't let it out of her sight. Since leaving the gallery, she tossed her keys on the counter, kicked off her shoes, and sank into the couch like her legs finally admitted how tired they were. Her phone buzzed. One new email. Subject: "Your work spoke when I couldn't." No name. She opened it. "Hi, Sienna. I was at the Lyon Gallery tonight. I stood in the back. Didn't speak. Didn't interrupt. I just watched. Your sketch of the hands, the ones holding the broken teacup. That wasn't a drawing. That was memory. I lost my mother last year. Haven't been able to say much since. But tonight, your page said something for me. You didn't paint for them. You painted for me. I just wanted to say, thank you." And Sienna read it 3 times, then set the phone down carefully, as if it had become a relic. She didn't cry. She smiled. The kind of smile that only comes when the world finally echoes something true back to you. The next day, she printed the email and taped it above her desk, right next to her first drawing, a crooked house with no roof that she'd made when she was 7. No gallery, no money, but for the first time, she felt like an artist. And across the city, in a modest apartment, Keanu Reeves quietly reread the same email, forwarded in by the sender, a friend of his mother's. He smiled gently and whispered to himself, "That's why we show up." The invitation was printed on thick linen paper. Her name, Sienna Lorne, was centered in gold foil right beneath the title. Emerging Voices featured Artist Showcase. No sponsor, no insider favor, just earned. She arrived at the Lyon Gallery 2 weeks later, sketchbook tucked under one arm, but this time not as armor, as evidence. The same women in designer heels stood near the champagne table. The same gallery assistant who once dismissed her now greeted her at the door with a nervous, almost deferential smile. "Miss Lorne, welcome back. We're so honored." Sienna nodded politely. "Thank you." Inside, 6 of her pieces had been mounted on sleek matte boards, framed, spotlit, and hanging with the same reverence once reserved for names she used to study in textbooks. A small plaque read, "From the sketchbook of Sienna Lorne, Unfiltered Emotions." She wandered toward the center of the room, where her drawing of the hands holding the broken teacup now hung in silence. A couple stood in front of it, arms folded. The woman leaned in and whispered, "I don't know why, but this one stays with me." "She's good," the man replied. "Feels like it came from someone real." They hadn't recognized her, and she didn't interrupt. She just smiled, standing quietly on the other side of the room, watching her work speak for itself. Then came a familiar voice, awkward, eager. "Hey, Sienna, right?" She turned. It was the champagne woman from the first night, the one who had laughed the loudest, hair pinned back tighter than before, a glass held carefully. "I just want to say, congrats. Really, I didn't see it before, but your stuff has depth." Sienna nodded once. "Thank you." The woman hesitated, waiting for judgment, for bitterness, for payback. But Sienna didn't offer any, just kindness, because people like her don't win by clapping back. They win by creating forward. Across the room, leaning near the sculpture where he first stood, Keanu watched her again, arms folded, hood down, not as her rescuer, not as a guest, just to witness. The night was winding down. Soft jazz played. Guests milled about, murmuring praise, exchanging business cards. A few art bloggers snapped photos in front of her sketched subway stillness. Sienna stood near the back, sipping water, letting herself breathe, until a woman approached, all sharp lines and sharper heels. Vivian Ray, a talent agent. She introduced herself with a handshake that gripped like a contract. "I represent new visual voices," Vivian said with a grin. "Voices that are ready to reach bigger walls. Private collectors, corporate exhibits, even brand collaborations." Sienna blinked. "Collaborations?" Vivian leaned in. "Your story? It's powerful, raw, but we need to shape it. A little polish. Fewer broken teacups, more universal metaphors. Something people can hang over a couch without explaining trauma, you know?" Sienna didn't laugh. Vivian misread the silence and pressed on. "We could fund your next series, launch a website, get you interviews. All we ask is the little lightness, something that sells." Keanu watched from a distance. He didn't step in. He didn't need to, because the real moment wasn't hers to be rescued from. It was hers to own. Sienna looked at the nearest sketch, a self-portrait, face half erased in charcoal smudge, her realest work. And then she said, "No." Vivian blinked. "I'm sorry. I won't dull myself to decorate someone's lobby," Sienna replied. "If it doesn't make people feel uncomfortable, it's not telling the truth." Vivian's jaw tightened, but she forced a smile. "Think it over." "I already did." Later, while gathering her things, Sienna heard a voice behind her. "You handled that well." She turned. Keanu stood there, hands in his pockets. "You heard?" "I saw." She smiled. "Did I do the right thing?" He tilted his head. "You did the true thing." She looked down at her sketchbook. "I want to keep drawing from where it hurts." Keanu nodded. "Then you're already ahead of most."
The classroom smelled like graphite and acrylic. A dozen students sat in mismatched chairs, sketch pads open, eyes darting between their teacher and the guest at the front of the room. Sienna stood beside the whiteboard, one hand resting on her own battered sketchbook, the same one from that night. The teacher had introduced her as a rising name in the raw expressionism movement. She still didn't know what that meant, but she knew why she was here. She scanned the room. Half the kids were nodding politely. A few clearly tuned out. But in the back corner, a boy, for him maybe, had pulled up. Notebook clutched against his chest like armor. Eyes locked on her like she was reading his diary out loud. "I'm not here to talk about success," Sienna said, breaking the silence. "I'm here to talk about failure." A few students straightened. "About the time I stood in a room full of people who made me feel like I didn't belong. The time someone told me, to my face, that I wasn't the type to be in a gallery." She opened her sketchbook, flipped it to the hands holding the broken teacup. "This drawing? That night, someone told me it was too sad, too heavy, that it wouldn't sell." She looked up. But someone else told me it meant something. And that was enough. The boy in the corner shifted, then raised his hand, slow, tentative. She nodded to him. He spoke quietly. What if the stuff I make just feels ugly? Sienna smiled. Then it's real. Not all art is meant to be pretty. Some of it is meant to be honest. A long silence. Then a small smile broke across his face. Sienna's heart cracked open, in the best way. After class, the boy slipped her a folded paper with a sketch on it. It was crude, but powerful. A figure with no face, holding a heavy heart stitched back together with mismatched thread. She didn't say, "Good job." She said, "You should never stop." Outside, as she packed her bag, her phone buzzed. A new message. No name. He stayed for the whole class. He never stays. You reached him. She looked up at the sky, overcast and soft, and whispered, "Someone reached me first." The offer came via email, just after midnight. "We'd like to offer you a solo exhibition. 12 original pieces. Title of your choosing. The space is yours." It was from Lyon Gallery. The same gallery. The same walls. But this time, the spotlight was hers. Sienna stared at the screen in stunned silence. Then smiled. Not with disbelief, but with recognition. Like she just found her own name in a place it once wasn't allowed. Opening night came fast. Her name now hung above the entrance in clean, minimalist type. Sienna Lorne, What We Carry. The pieces were raw. Unfiltered. Drawn from grief, memory, healing, and hope, all scrawled in charcoal, ink, graphite, and thread. People stood still in front of them. They didn't talk. They didn't sip champagne. They just felt. An hour in, while answering questions from a pair of journalists, Sienna saw her. In the doorway, the woman with the white blouse. The one who once said, "She doesn't look like a collector." Now holding something in her hands. A wrapped frame. Sienna excused herself gently and approached. The woman looked nervous. Out of place. "Hi," she said softly. "You probably don't remember me." "I do." The woman nodded, eyes flicking to the floor. "I was awful to you. That night. And I've thought about it more than I want to admit." Sienna stayed quiet. Then the woman held out the frame. Inside was one of Sienna's first prints. A reprint from her website. The sketch of the coat dripping rain. "I bought this," she said. "And I hung it. In my home. It's the only thing that makes the room feel like someone's feeling something in there." She looked at Sienna, tearful now. "I was wrong about you." Sienna didn't offer grace as performance. She didn't say, "It's okay." She simply looked the woman in the eye and said, "I hope it keeps making you feel something." Then walked back into her own exhibit. A woman not made bitter by cruelty, but made brighter because she never shrank from it. Across the room, Keanu leaned quietly in the corner. No cameras. No fanfare. He watched the woman leave with her print. And watched Sienna stay in her power. Then turned to go. No goodbye needed. Because the best stories? They don't end. They ripple. It was nearly midnight. The gallery was closed, the lights dimmed, and only one soft spotlight remained, casting a quiet glow on the last sketch in the room. Sienna sat alone on a bench beneath it, sketchbook in her lap, coat draped over her shoulders. Her exhibition had ended an hour ago. But she wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Because this wasn't just the end of a show. It was the end of the version of her who once stood outside this place, afraid to walk in. She flipped to the back page of her sketchbook. Then she began to draw. Not something painful. Not something heavy. But a man in a hoodie. Standing beside a girl with a sketchbook. Saying nothing. Doing just enough. She titled it, "The Ripple." Weeks later, that piece would hang in a community arts center, anonymously donated. It wouldn't have her name on it. Only a small printed note beneath the frame. You don't have to shout to change someone's life. Sometimes you just have to stay. One evening, a student walking past the sketch paused, looked up at it, and stood still. He didn't know why, but something about it made him breathe deeper. He pulled out his own notebook, sat on the floor, and started to draw. Back in her studio, Sienna sat beside the window. Sketchbook open. A message pinged on her phone. A known number. I saw your piece at the center. I don't know who you are. But I think you saved me tonight. Thank you. She smiled, closed her eyes, and whispered, not to anyone in particular, thank you for seeing me first. Thanks for watching. Have you ever been changed by a quiet act of kindness? Tell your story in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it.